And welcome to another episode of All Things Conflict with me, your host, Maria Arper. I'm very happy today to introduce to you Andrea Gamson. Andrea is an author, a connector, a mentor, an advisor, and she works in the world of social impact. She works with social enterprise and corporate leadership, connecting people and helping to make the world a better place. We have had some dealings together, which I've been really delighted, and Andrea is a force of nature. So let's jump in. So, Andrea, welcome to All Things Conflict. So we met because I came across some marketing you were doing around social impact, social value, and I really liked, what you put out. So I got in touch. We've done a couple of things together. And actually, when I met you in person, I mean, you really are a force of nature. You're really a kind of can-do, hands-on, let's not be a talking shop. Let's actually produce value. And I really like that about you. So I'm really pleased that you were happy to come on as a guest. And maybe you could say a bit better than I can, something about what you do and what drives you.
Thank you, Maria. And that means a lot coming from you. I would describe you exactly the same way, actually. Pleasure to be here. Absolutely. I am a social impact support person. I could probably come up with a sexier way of saying it. But what that means is that I very much feel like my mission is to support those on the front line of doing the social impact. So those who are supporting vulnerable and marginalized groups in society. But I do it by supporting the organisations that are supporting them, if you will. And I particularly focus on supporting those who themselves are marginalised or vulnerable or lived experience founders and leaders of these organisations, because those are typically the leaders who get overlooked. And, they receive the least support when it comes to investment funding, incubators, accelerators support, those kinds of things within the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I run an organization called Social Impact Support that I founded in 2023. And under that, we, in a way, incubate our own ideas that we germinate and seed and take out into the world, whether they are programs or, creative content ideas and campaigns, and then we see which ones stick and roll them out. So we currently have 3 of those ideas within our portfolio. NetShift is a sustainability consultancy that's women-led, that's a social enterprise, it's a community interest company, and it supports small businesses on the path to net zero. Then we have Regenerative, which is our mentoring program, which is all about leadership development for building future fit leaders, so that we have leaders running all of our companies that are ready for all of the challenges that lie ahead, that we're already experiencing right now. And I can tell you more about that. And that's where we've engaged. And then, of course, I've got Social Starters, which was my old company that I co-founded with Anna Moran. But that's since been closed down and then become a book. So its legacy lives on. It's also a course called the Inequities at the moment. And we do lots of coaching with purpose-driven or aspiring purpose-driven professionals who are looking to have careers in the social impact sector.
So that's a really good suite, isn't it? It's a kind of all-encompassing. So there are people delivering social impact, and you're particularly interested in the people with lived experience that come out of that experience and want to sort of help others and help other people to succeed in life. But then, the whole world of social impact is interesting because where's the funding coming from? And then there are businesses and people of means or people with resources that can support. And so you're a great connector, aren't you? And then there's the individual, the person who looks at their life and says, there's no meaning and purpose. I do a great job. I'm talented. I'm getting promoted. I'm earning loads of money. And yet I can't find the meaning and purpose in this. And that kind of does happen to a lot of us as we get older. I mean, certainly happened to me. And you've got a way of supporting people, because you can't just go from a sustainable life where you're sustaining yourself to helping others. It's a bridge. You need a bridge, and you're that bridge. I think that's a really good way of putting it, isn't it? You're that bridge for anyone, whatever end of the spectrum they are, that believes that whatever we do in life should have some kind of social value.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's a really good way of putting it, because it all started when I was trying to orchestrate my own bridge, if you will, through my career. So I first started out working in corporate media sales. I was climbing that ladder that everybody can relate to, that goes into that corporate executive route within their career. And something really felt quite off for me, even though, I sat around the boardroom table with really important figureheads within the media industry, and could be perceived to be doing really great work within the confines, I suppose, of the role that I had. But something was feeling off and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But whenever I applied to charities, which was the typical thing that you would usually do if you wanted to go off and do something that had meaning and purpose, I just wasn't getting an interview. I'd get great, responses actually saying, "Oh, you've got amazing experience. You've clearly got fantastic transferable skills, but you have no experience working in charities or in the social sector whatsoever. So, it just doesn't cut it, basically." So I went on what was essentially about a 12-year DIY career transition of my own, which is quite a long time if you think about it. By the way, when I say 12 years, it's because pretty much within 6 months of working in media, I was already thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I want to sit behind a desk for my entire life, when I was in my early 20s. And that's a whole other story, where I thought about joining the military and all sorts of quite crazy out there things, just because something didn't quite feel right and I wasn't sure what my purpose was. By the way, the military route was because I got sold a humanitarian dream that was, if you join the military, you can go around the world doing humanitarian work, which was just a fantastic advertising campaign. But needless to say, I dodged a bullet, didn't join the army, and
literally, literally, that's not a metaphor, is it?
And so then what I ended up creating was essentially a shortcut to being able to transition one's career out of corporate and that sort of middle to senior executive career pathway that many find themselves on, and then hitting that point that exactly you made, where you go, is this it? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And that's where Social Starters was born. Now, when we first started it sounds quite wild now in the post-COVID era, but we were deploying volunteers from the private sector all around the world in 5 different countries to go and volunteer and share their skills over 6-week programs that we called the Immersive program, where you would then go and work alongside a social enterprise or a couple of social enterprises, really at the grassroots in those countries that they were in. And we're talking places like India, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Brazil, really exciting places, but, very challenging conditions and climates. And so a real baptism of fire to get out there and go and get that experience. Now, we've worked with hundreds of professionals in that context through Social Starters, and go look where they are now. It's incredible what they're doing. They're heads of sustainability, running purpose divisions within, top consulting firms, out there leading on social impact within the private sector. And of course, many have started their own social enterprises as well. So those career trajectories are really, really exciting. But now we're in slightly different times, aren't we? And I think there's a really big focus on, how do I find purpose and meaning within the context of what I do now? Because, quitting your job, going overseas, those kinds of things, it's not to say you can't still do them. Of course you can, but there's just a little bit of a different economic context at the moment, isn't there? And there's a bit of a movement towards perhaps looking for more meaning within your existing workplace. And so now we also offer programs for those people who are in their corporate roles, who are exactly that, looking for something to do that makes them come alive, be out of their comfort zone, be in front of people they wouldn't normally be exposed to. And of course, working on a mission or a cause that they're really passionate about. It might be that that executive has some lived experience as well of the cause or mission that they're finding themselves volunteering around, either in the role of mentor or consultant, or it's just something that they've always really found really interesting, or it's piqued their interest somehow. Perhaps they knew somebody who's been through something quite similar or had that experience, so it means something to them. And of course, that helps you scratch that burning itch that you've got to give back and to be exposed to things that are different and to really understand, how the world works. How do we solve these problems, these greatest societal and environmental challenges of our time? And so that's what our Regenerous strand does now, which brings together these two different groups of people, those VCSEs and the leaders on the front line doing the great work, who themselves may be on an interesting career trajectory of their own. And perhaps they didn't go to traditional business school. And so they're there creating great impact, but they may be saying, I don't know how to create a commercial strategy. I don't know how to do my digital marketing. And so then these great executives come in with that desire to create a difference, and they have those skills. And so then you can see how bringing them together then allows them to solve problems together, learn from each other, and go out there and create some real change.
That's it's amazing. I think several things were going off in me as you were speaking, and one is that we're benefiting from that right now, aren't we, with one of your clients, one of your corporate clients? Yeah. So one of the things is that we're benefiting from that one of those programs because we're getting some amazing support from Pernod Ricard. Which we just wouldn't have been able, without your connecting and your program, we wouldn't have been able to stretch out that far. And then I was also thinking about this series of the podcast is actually called Justice Redesigned. And of course, justice brings the image of the scales of justice. And I just felt that there was something about the work you're doing that goes beyond the meaning and purpose and putting balance into some of what is very imbalanced in our society. And maybe you could speak to that.
Well, that speaks to then the equity piece, isn't it? About redressing the imbalances, of which we know there are many inequitable imbalances, if I'm saying that right, throughout all different pillars of our society. And of course, the broader piece around nature and our environment and our natural habitats. Regenerous, the word itself comes from being more regenerative. We seek a more regenerative economy and more regenerative business. Now, at the moment, it's an aspiration. I'm not going to lie. There aren't loads of examples where you can say, oh, here's a regenerative company, because to be truly regenerative means you're not causing any harm to the planet at all in the manufacturing or the way that you're doing things. Releasing emissions is technically causing harm, even if they're small. So yes, but it's an aspiration and it's something that we're all working to, and we need that because the planet is a living, breathing ecosystem, if you're in that school of thought, which is the Gaia theory, which is scientific, and James Lovelock, did great work around this. But that ecosystem, it's all about balance and harmony and bringing it all back into balance. And since the Industrial Revolution a few hundred years ago, we've just contributed somewhat to some major imbalances there. And then within that, you can use that as a metaphor if you want to, with how we've almost mirrored that within our society, with the way that we treat each other. Whether you are born into affluence or not, it's just a bit of a lottery, really, isn't it? But then that follows you throughout your life. And so a lot of the great work that the VCSE sector is now trying to do, and of course also, DEI departments within corporate firms too, is about redressing all of these imbalances so that social mobility can really happen and thrive. So it doesn't matter where you're born or who to, everybody has the same chance at life, and to go out into the world and do the things that they feel most called to. I think that's just a beautiful dream, but why can't that be real? Why can't we have that?
Well, what I really like about what you're saying is that there's a picture that, I mean, certainly as you were speaking, I could identify and see that picture very clearly. But then also, I could see that it's completely possible to make a contribution without having to blow your own life up, because, you talked about the Industrial Revolution. Well, even at my age, by the time I was born, we were well underway. And so if you're born into it, it's about when you get that icky feeling about, well, something about all this isn't right, you don't have to blow your whole life up or throw everything away in order to make some kind of valid contribution. And that's the bit, isn't it? Is like, how can you do just the one bit you can do? Because if we all did that, difference happens.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like the idea of when the butterfly flaps its wings, the ripple effect of that.
Yeah.
You make one small little change, like, for example, something that feels really accessible that's bothering you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that you decide to raise a bit of money for charity. Let's go with some of the standard things that people do. They go into the London Marathon, say, and they're going to raise £500, £1,000 for charity. Lovely. Go do something like that if that feels achievable, if you've never done that before. Or how about you go down to your local homeless shelter and go and help them there for a couple of weeks, couple of months, whatever it is. Give your Christmas up, if you will. I mean, I remember doing that a decade or so ago, and going and working, in my local shelter over the Christmas months and helping with the Crisis at Christmas campaign, which was one of the most amazing ways I've ever spent Christmas, and so joyful. I can't even begin to explain. Volunteering in your local community. There's so many different things that you could do. Or go do a beach cleanup, if you will, on a Sunday morning when the weather's nice, if you live in the coastal regions, or go clean up the Thames River if you're in London, because that needs a lot of cleaning. I don't know, whatever the thing is, there's so many different ways that you can volunteer, give back, and they can be relatively small and not therefore the sorts of things that, you, like you say, blowing your life up is the metaphor to making a really, really, really big change. But what I would say to people is, once you develop a bit of a muscle for doing things that are different to your normal modus operandi, if you will, whatever that be, you might find it becomes a little bit addictive, and there'll come a point where making a brave decision, making the bold step, taking that slight leap of faith is a part of the process as well to creating greater change in your life, if you have a burning desire for it, of course. And you'll know if you do. And I would also say, really listen in on that, because one of the cruelest ways we can treat ourselves, and we're here on the All Things Conflict podcast, but our own internal battles and that internal conflict we have with ourselves is one of the greatest to overcome, isn't it? And so if we have that within ourselves, usually I've learned along the way that it means that something's not right within me. I'm not living to my values, or I'm not speaking up about something. There's not a truth. There's a truth that I'm not in, if you understand what I mean, right?
Completely.
And that's something that we've got to really listen to. And if it's about career, and if it's about purpose and the path that we're on, sometimes taking a bold leap it's one of the assignments in my book, Maria.
Well, that was what I was going to say. This brings us very nicely onto the book, because that's, there's taking a leap out of kind of madness, the kind of like, I've had enough and I've just got to do something, anything, because we've got so full that we can't contain it anymore. And then they're saying, well, I want to make change, and it's a process and it's gradual, and where do I get that expertise? And that's what I think you've done in the book is saying, I can hold your hand so that you can actually examine this forensically and kind of be able to know what the steps are to get from here to here. I mean, it's like the work I do, the work I do is about, it took me 30 odd years before I even could sort of understand what I had to learn. And my work is to try and give people that without them having to do 30 years worth of mistake making, so and you're doing the same thing. You're saying, well, hang on, here's a pathway, here's some signposting, and maybe you could just say a bit about the book, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I resonate with so much of what you just said. When you go through, I'll speak from my own perspective. When I went through my own career transition and really got myself out of what felt like quite a dark hole where I felt really trapped, really this was a metamorphosis
Mm.
of a human being, and
Yeah,
I think many of us can relate to
yeah,
this. But it took me so long to get there because there was nobody coming in. I had no inputs, if you
yeah,
will. And I don't know if it's just that it was indicative of the time, because I'm talking about the 2000s, so I'm going back 20 years here. Whereas I think there's a lot more now that people can access coaches, programs, courses. There's much more of a zeitgeist around this. But I just felt so strongly I wanted to shortcut this process for everyone else because it was deeply painful feeling that lost. And I really just want to reassure everybody that, it doesn't need to be the case. You're not
mm,
alone. And finding one's purpose is the adventure itself. It's the classic, not about the destination, but the journey
yeah.
getting there. And it will take everybody different paces and times. But the book is a gentle friend, if you will, and also a loving nudge when it's needed to say, look, here's the methodology. I've worked with 500 plus people on this, so I know that it works. I've seen it work. There are 5 different social starter types. You could be one of those. And it's about finding your path towards it with these 30 assignments that you can dip in and out of. Not every assignment will be ready for you, or you won't be ready for every assignment, if you will. But it's packaged up in a 6-part framework. So, the first part is about the self. It's about understanding who you are, because you can't do the journey to where you want to get to if you actually just don't
Mhm.
do that inner work first. So yeah, then it takes you through these 6 Ps, which are called the 6 Ps of purpose, which is that methodology. So yeah, it's a great book. It's a heavy read at times, and I wrote it really aware of the fact that I was illuminating some people, certainly in the earlier chapters, to the fact that the world has been crafted and curated, maybe by accident, but in some cases, if you're a bit more cynical, you could say artfully and designed that way to make us consumers in an economy of capitalism where we do end up feeling quite trapped. So actually, when we can start to, unravel that a little bit for ourselves and see what role we're playing in that system, then our mind can really open up to actually, gosh, there's a whole other way we can do our place in the world. So then the rest of the book is about helping you figure out what that is to get there.
Well, that's really interesting, and I do want to just throw something in there, about how is it a mess or was it all done artfully? Because the way I've been thinking about this is, on one level we could say all the systems are broken, and on the other hand we could say no, actually the systems are working exactly as they're designed to. Which, where do you sit in that?
Well, they were designed by, let's be honest, men, quite a while ago, maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago or so. Well, if we even just take GDP, that's been around for nearly 100 years. It was born out of the Great
Mm,
War, at a time of like great, like economic challenge, and it had its purpose then. And so these systems, when they were created, they were probably fit for purpose at the time within reason, but nothing's changed since then. We're still running on these old antiquated systems. And so if you imagine, like a bit like with technology, it builds on top of itself, doesn't it? And it keeps becoming bigger and bigger and bigger to the point that you can't unpick what was originally there in the first place behind it. So it's become this wicked, wicked, complex, and I mean wicked in the context of like it's a real gnarly problem that you
mm,
can't unpick very easily. That's why the systems are broken. They're a higgledy-piggledy mess. And so part of the challenge of our time and the generations after us will be to really quite change these systems. How they're going to do it, I just don't know. There are experiments and some tests out there. Alternative economic models are really fascinating, but of course they are ideological because we've always been in the same system. But this is a really, really fascinating school of thought. It's
yeah,
probably a
wow.
separate podcast in and of its own. But I for me, it's just about let's own the little lane that we
Yeah,
can make change, because it can get really overwhelming when
yeah.
we start thinking about solving the world's greatest challenges. No one else has been able to do it. And if we can own our little lane and create change in the spaces and communities that we live, and
Mm,
focus on those places that we are inhabiting ourselves, and not worrying too much about other places around the world. And if everybody did that, imagine how much would become abundant and how much joy we would be giving and seeing and feeling with our lives. And, a happier nation and one that's more prosperous and has a higher well-being index is one that's going to just naturally change anyway, isn't it? I believe. So moving toward a higher well-being, those well-being economies, that's one of the schools of thought, is something that I'm quite excited about. There's something energetic in there.
There is, yeah. Yeah, you're just reminding me of a story that someone told me about an ant that's lying on its back, and all the animals walk by and say, "What are you doing?" And the ant says, "The sky's going to fall down," and so the ant's got its arms and legs up, kind of thing. The sky's going to fall down. The sky's going to fall down, and they all laugh and move on. And then eventually, the lion or the elephant or whatever walks by and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, the sky's going to fall down." He says, "Well, why are you lying on your back with your legs in the air?" He says, "Well, one does what one can." I just think that's lovely.
Oh, no. I thought you were going to say the elephant came along and then trampled on it.
No, that's a whole nother podcast.
I haven't heard that analogy before. Yeah, exactly. And we do all react in the ways that come naturally to us. But then what have we been feeding ourselves? This again, I'm now going to go down another tangent. What have we been feeding ourselves in the first place?
Yes.
Passively or proactively, in order to change, whether we lie on our back and put our hands in the air, or if we're, I don't know, studying a map somewhere else and looking to see if the sky's genuinely going to fall down. I don't know, like,
or just laughing at the ant.
just laugh at it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lot of people who are, unbeknownst to them, receiving content and information without challenging it, and it's informing the way that they view the world, and it's creating fear and more misery and hatred. And that's another challenge that we're really facing quite profoundly at the moment.
Yeah, there's someone called Joanna Macy, and she does what's called despair work. And really worth looking her stuff up. But in the end, what she comes to is you not to get consumed by the overwhelm of the amount of change, because that's one of the things that can happen. You get completely overwhelmed, and to come back to what is the one thing that you can do that is sustainable for you and will bring that sort of fulfillment and change and turn the dial a little bit. And really nice, lovely work, internal work.
Yeah, and if I'm saying it rightly, she talked a lot about active hope.
Yes,
And how we cultivate that active hope within us is really important, because otherwise we're at a risk of perhaps just spiraling.
Yeah.
That's not good, because when we feel low, when we're depressed, we're demotivated, we become unproductive. And all we then want to do, again, I'm talking for a lot of people here, but, I watch a lot of podcasts, so I feel like this is somewhat informed. And I know it because I relate to this also myself personally. We just want to numb. I know I want to numb when I'm feeling low or hopeless. It's a bit like a case of getting through each day, isn't it, until it passes. But then I become unproductive. My projects don't get the same level of energy from me. And in some cases I might, not make some projects successful. So it's really important, isn't it, to try and do what we can to stay in that space of hopeful. I know it's really challenging, but...
Well, I think you bring something else up for me. And, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but what you bring up is we all need support. That's another sort of disease of our society, is for this belief that we should go it alone, and that we shouldn't seek support, and that we shouldn't talk about, when we're sliding, and that we notice when we're sliding, and the idea that actually we're not islands. We're not islands. I need support, you need support. And so how do we help each other through that? And I think that's what I notice in you, is that you're a really big resource and a big source of support. And then I suppose I would ask you, and where do you get support?
Well, yeah, exactly. I was really impacted maybe 15 years ago or so by the Jim Rohn quote that said, "You're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most
Yeah,
time with."
yeah,
And I remember saying that to a friend. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this program, but
yeah.
I asked it to him and he said, "Oh, well, then I'm officially an asshole." And I thought, well, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes we can't help who we spend the most time
That's
with
right.
because it's not in our control. But isn't it wonderful, though, to think that there can be some control there? And we can choose who we spend more time
Time
with
with.
and
Yeah,
who we dial a bit back on. Because if
yeah.
it's impacting on then who we become, that's profound, that's huge. So it's really important in the journey, and Social Starters, the book, takes you through this process of really evaluating and auditing all of your relationships to then seeing, okay, well, if I want to be this person, if I want to get there, if I want to start my own social enterprise or become the architect of a new mentoring scheme in my firm, I've got to then surround myself by other people who are doing that so I can see evidence of the fact that it's possible. I can learn from them, soak up their positive energy around it, understand the challenges that they face. So this is a really key part of the process. And so, yeah, I myself have also done that. Sometimes it's just a case of reaching out to people and asking for a coffee, and you never know, they might be in a mode of saying yes themselves, as was Neil Prem, one of my earliest coaches, which I later found out I thought he was just so enamored by our business model and our idea that he just had to come on board as an advisor, that he didn't have a say in the matter. It turned out when I got to know him that he was in a month of saying yes. So anybody that asked
Ah,
him
right.
anything in that month, he said yes to. He was on his own journey. And isn't that wonderful, though, that then he came on board? This is an advisor to lots of amazing businesses in Cambridge. He works with Cambridge University. He's a well celebrated business advisor, and he agreed to be our advisor in the early days of our business, which helped validate
Fantastic.
our model, get new customers, and yeah, make sure that
So
we could thrive.
I should imagine that anybody listening to you will want to either buy the book or get in touch with you or find out a bit more. So how can people do that?
Yeah, email me hello at social impact support, social impact dot support, I should say,
Oh yeah,
or at andreagamson.co.uk. You can Google me. Actually, I'm just really easy to find on Google.
yeah,
I'm only one of 2 people in the world, so I generally do come up if you put my name, Andrea Gamson, in, and my contact details are everywhere because I'm a big fan, Maria, of an open door policy.
yeah,
I just want to chat to people, connect, learn from, and give lessons to, and share, and be a part of something that is a movement, really. And so the energy of people stepping forward, I'm not, that doesn't bother me. I'm not someone that's like
yeah.
not going to reply. I reply to everybody.
Well, I'm certainly really happy that I made contact with you, and look forward to a sort of very enriching, kind of mutually beneficial relationship with you. And so I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for giving me your time on all things conflict. And I hope that other people can really benefit from what you've got to offer.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maria. It's great to chat to you today.
Thank you. Bye.